Alright, so as you guys know, I do a lot of card show related content, especially on my YouTube. People seem to respond to that pretty well, so I thought it might be fun to do a two-part series on card show pet peeves, because even though a lot of us enjoy going to shows, in some instances the experience can be less than ideal. There are definitely some moments that just make you shake your head. So in part 1 today, I'm going to share 5 of my biggest pet peeves from the buyer's perspective. These are situations that I've encountered on numerous occasions, and I'm willing to bet that many of you have as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into pet peeve number 1, which is the overhyped or misrepresented show. And you guys probably know what I'm talking about, those shows that overpromise and underdeliver. And a lot of times I think this is primarily new shows. In some areas, the card show scene is pretty saturated, so when these new shows pop up, they're trying pretty hard to convince people to set foot inside the doors, but nobody likes a bait and switch. I remember a show I went to a couple years ago. It took me about 3.5 hours to get there, and it was advertised as having 400 tables. Well, I finally get there, I walk in the door, and half of the convention center is empty. And I think that feeling alone really soured my whole experience at that show. It's not that I couldn't have enjoyed the tables that actually were there, but I felt like I had been tricked. Over time, that show appears to have grown, and I figure they probably fill the rest of that convention center out. In fact, I have another friend that's gone, and he said he had a great time, but it's just hard for me to get back in the car and go there after feeling tricked the first time around. In other instances, I've seen shows branded as sports card shows. They say they've got 100, 200 tables or whatever. They actually have filled all of those tables up, but you get there and then half of them are Pokemon or some other type of cards. I don't have anything against people that buy or sell those cards necessarily, but if a show is branded as a sports card show and the majority of the tables are not sports cards, something about that situation doesn't seem right. At the end of the day, if you're going to put on a show and promote it, just make sure you can deliver on what you promised. Alright, pet peeve number 2 is the no price dealer. And out of every topic on this list, this is probably the most debatable one. I've been pretty firm on this stance for a while now, but I respect the fact that not everyone is on the same side. Anyway, I can't tell you how many times I've inquired about an unpriced card only to have an awkward interaction immediately follow. And I guess you could say maybe that's just a me thing, but the other constant variable in this equation is that cards are not priced. When you run into this situation, one of 2 likely scenarios is going to follow. The dealer knows a price, gives it to you, and gets to see your reaction in real time, and I'll admit I probably don't have a great poker face, or what's even worse is the seller doesn't know what they want for a card, and you have to stand there and wait while they try to look it up. And as everyone knows, comps are not always cut and dry. There are a lot of nuances when it comes to looking this stuff up. And this happened to me a few weeks ago, and the seller ended up calling someone on the phone for a price, like it was the banker from Deal or No Deal. By the time he finally got in touch with someone on the other end of the line, I decided I really didn't want the card all that bad in the first place. So it was even more comical when the number was revealed, and it was probably 3 or 4 times what a card like that should have been priced. So if I ever run into that table again, I'm going to have to want a card real bad to risk putting myself through a similar exercise. On the flip side, a lot of the cards I come home with from shows are impulse buys. If you're a dealer and you're pricing your stuff, we don't have to have all of that unnecessary conversation and wait time. There's a good chance I'm going to walk away having bought some of your stuff. Like I said, a lot of people are divided on this point. I know it takes a while, but it makes all the sense in the world to price your stuff ahead of time. Okay, I mentioned comps earlier and how not everything is cut and dry. Pet peeve number 3 is the comp cherry picker. This is the dealer who picks and chooses what comps they want to use. For example, let's say you're eyeing a card and they pull up an eBay listing from 2 months ago showing that it sold for $300. Okay, but what has this card or similar cards done since then? And then when you pull your cards out to trade or sell, they'll go to the ends of the earth to find a comp that gives them an advantage over you. Now, I'm not here to tell you how to comp your cards, but my strategy to combat both of these situations is to look for a range. Obviously, there are going to be outliers, and sometimes you just throw those completely away. But if you can come up with 3 or 4 sales in a reasonable amount of time that haven't been impacted by any extenuating circumstances like a major trade or even a death, that should allow you to come up with a number that's fair for both sides. And if the dealer doesn't take that, then you just walk away at that point. But at least they were willing to engage, unlike the subject of pet peeve number 4, the disinterested dealer. Nothing kills the excitement of looking through a table faster than a dealer who seems like they'd rather be anywhere else. Typically, they're glued to their phone, and if you want to have any sort of interaction with them, you have to interrupt their game of Candy Crush. You ask a question about a card, you get a one-word response, no enthusiasm, no engagement, just a vibe that makes you wonder why they even paid to set up in the first place. Now look, I get it. I've set up at shows of different sizes before. I know it can make for a very long, tiring day or multiple days in some cases, and sometimes dealers have other things on their minds. But if you're running a table, people are stopping by because they're interested in what you have or what you potentially have to offer. If you act like you couldn't care less, buyers are going to pick up on that fast, and they're probably going to move on. On the flip side, there are some dealers that are almost too engaged, and they'll ask you what players you're looking for, and they don't necessarily read the vibes right. Like if you say, hey, I just want to look, they'll continue to try to pull things out of boxes and show you different things. Or if you say, hey, I'm a basketball fan, they say, hey, well, I really don't have that, but I've got these cards over here. They aren't listening. And while the engagement is the complete opposite of the disinterested dealer, in many cases, it can still have the same effect. Long story short, a little balance goes a long way. Engage, but don't be overbearing, and at the very least, look like you actually want to be there. Last but not least, pet peeve number 5, the time capsule dealer. Chances are at some point in elementary school, you and your classmates buried a box filled with relics from that era, hoping that someday future generations would dig it up and get a glimpse into the past. Well, some dealers have their own version of a time capsule, except instead of old toys and newspapers, it's their showcases and value boxes. And instead of being buried underground, they bring them to every show, unchanged, for years on end. You know the tables I'm talking about, the ones still priced like it's 2021. Look, I get it, no one wants to take a loss on a card, but when your entire setup feels frozen in time, it makes it tough for buyers to even start a conversation. Truth be told, a little flexibility and awareness of the current market can go a long way in allowing for deals to happen. Alright, so there you have it. Those are 5 things that, in my opinion, can really test a buyer's patience at card shows. I tried to present these in a way that's more about practical advice than just venting or complaining, so hopefully you got something out of it. And keep an eye out for a future segment where I tackle things from the dealer's perspective instead. Maybe there was something I talked about in today's segment that you don't agree with, or maybe there were some topics that you think I missed out on entirely. Feel free to let me know. Remember, there are new episodes of the audio podcast that come out every Thursday, and as always, thanks for watching.